Blackface. Ooh, not good.
White Zombie.
Welcome to Duke of the Dead, the YouTube channel where I will be dedicating my life to covering every piece of zombie media possible. From movies to video games, books, comics, CDs if they exist. I'm here to cover it all, and today we're going to start with the first ever zombie film, White Zombie. White Zombie is a film from 1932 that is often regarded as one of the first zombie movies ever made. It was made by brothers Victor and Edward Halpern. The movie is based on a book that came out just a few years prior called The Magic Island, and it was written by William Seabrook. The story of White Zombie is about a couple that plans on getting married in Haiti before they are intercepted by a man named Charles and a man named Murder. This is one of the first instances of zombies that we see in film. Now, they may not be the flesh-eating, brain-sucking, door-knocking, crazed lunatics that we know of today, but this movie was really important in setting some groundwork for the zombie genre as a whole. And despite the fact that this movie was not well received when it came out, it has become a cult classic over the years. So with that brief little synopsis out of the way, I introduce to you White Zombie. The movie wastes no time getting straight to it with the title card and a kick-ass theme song. We're introduced to our main characters Neil Parker and Madeline Short, an engaged couple who have for some reason decided to get married in Haiti. While driving, they immediately encounter a funeral that is going on in the middle of the road. They stop to observe and their driver tells them it is a burial and that they are doing this in the middle of the road as to deter the local grave robbers.
That's a cheerful introduction for you to our West Indies.
This is the cautious optimism that gets white tourists killed. If I see a funeral on the side of the road and I'm next to my lady friend, I ain't gonna be like, hey, look at that cheerful introduction. I'll be like, all right, baby, let's go get married. And back in America. As they continue, they come across a man played by Bela Lugosi. The driver asks them where they can find the house of Charles Beaumont. The question the man straight up completely ignores as he has become enamored with the woman in the car, Madeline. He stares at her for a prolonged period of time, but it is cut short as the driver spots some zombies coming down the hill and flees the scene. But that's not before Bela Lugosi snatches a piece of Madeline's clothing, something he seems a little too excited about. After they safely arrive at their destination, the driver tells them that the men they saw walking down the hill were in fact dead bodies brought back to life. He calls them zombies. And this is something that the couple doesn't take too serious. Like, they seem a little weary of it, but they're if you told me dead bodies were walking, again, it'd be, let's get the fuck out of Haiti. After this, that Neil and Madeline encounter an old man named Dr. Bruner, who says that the claims that the men were zombies is nothing but superstition. He just kind of writes it off as an old folk tale. And after that, the three go inside and ask for the man of the hour, Charles Beaumont. Now, who is Charles Beaumont? Charles Beaumont is a very rich man who apparently met Madeline and Neil just a few days prior. And when he found out that they were engaged and soon to be married, he had them come straight to Haiti to his estate so he could put on the most lovely wedding for them. But what they don't know is that he has ulterior motives.
You don't seem to realize what this girl means to me. Why, I'd sacrifice anything I have in the world for her.
Oh, this man's gonna fuck your girl. After Dr. Bruner learns why Neil and Madeline are in Haiti, he immediately warns them that they should leave the second they are married, showing us that he knows there's more to play on this island. Now the scene cuts over to Charles Beaumont, who is deciding on whether or not he will welcome them. His butler tells him that they are there, and he is kind of toying with the idea of whether or not he's going to go talk to him face to face, but ultimately decides to, considering it would be a little sketchy if he hadn't. He tells his butler to lie about his presence and tell them that he is not currently available, but his butler warns him that Dr. Bruner is skeptical of his involvement in this marriage and that it would be best to show his face. This is not something Charles cares too deeply about. Charles then inquires about the whereabouts of a nameless man, a man the butler is weary of and warns Charles of. This is when we learn that Charles invited Madeline and Neil to get married at his place as a way to prevent the marriage from happening, as he is madly in love with her. Charles reluctantly goes downstairs and welcomes his guest. He immediately starts rizzing up Madeline, something Neil picks up on immediately and seems kind of pissed about. But he's a little bitch, so he ain't do shit. Look, dude, if I'm gonna keep it 10 with you, if a guy richer than me is hitting on my girlfriend, I'm crashing the fuck out.
You play with my heart. You play with my fucking heart.
After this, the butler takes the couples to their rooms, and as Neil is getting cozy in his, he notices that Charles has snuck out and just got onto the back of a carriage that is being driven by, you guessed it, a zombie. Before we get into this next scene, I just want to say you're going to get to see some zombie action. But the weirdest thing about these zombies is that they don't eat flesh, they don't tear down walls to get at their prey. The reason why these zombies exist is far more darker than that. So much more f***ed up and brutal than flesh eating. The reason they were brought back from the dead, the reason they were reanimated was because... Hold on. They were brought back for slavery. The reason these zombies exist is solely to operate Bela Lugosi's sugarcane mill. It is being completely operated by zombies. You got the thing that they're turning, it grinds up the sugar cane, you got the ones dumping in the sugar cane. It is then that we learn that this sugarcane mill is owned and operated by the man we saw earlier, Murder Ligendrick. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Probably not, I'm dumb as hell. But this is his sugarcane mill. And it's to get a feel as to how mindless these zombies really are. They work at a constantly slow pace. And it's so depraved that they continue to work even when one of their own falls into the grinder, is ground up into tiny little pieces with the sugar cane. I don't know about Haiti, but FDA ain't gonna like that. But this sugar cane mill is the setting for the scene where Charles meets up with Murder and they begin to discuss the plans that they have. Now, a quick little side note, having the name Murder as a voodoo witch doctor is insane. Like, do you think his parents gave him that name? Well, did he take the name from somebody else, or was he just like, yo, that's gonna sound like some cold ass shit once I have an army of zombies behind me? I'm getting off topic. Murder straight up says, hey dude, that ain't how that works. He says kidnapping her is pointless, and instead, he very centrally suggests turning her to a zombie by drugging her food or planting it inside of a flower. Charles is reluctant to both take the potion and use it on Madeline, but Murder ensures him that this is the only way for her to fall in love with him, as she is just too deeply in love to give a rat's ass about old Charles Beaumont. We then go back to the mansion where the wedding ceremony is soon to begin. We see Charles and Madeline walking down the aisle together. Charles is just begging Madeline, call off the wedding and fall in love with him. And she kind of just looks at him and says, hey, you're kind of ruining my vibe there, Chief. Can you stop doing that? Again, if I'm getting married, some random dude ain't gonna be this close to my wife. What the hell are you talking about, dude? Just straight up macking at the wedding, Jesus Christ. 30s were just different, I guess. Madeline rejects the offer, telling him not to spoil the good vibe he cultivated and the wonderful wedding they're about to have. He pretends to listen to her wishes and says he has a gift for her. So we can only assume that this flower's got zombie juice in it. As all of this is happening, we see Murder outside stealing candles and cutting them into voodoo dolls of Madeline. Madeline and Neil had just finished their wedding and are inside celebrating being newlyweds. Her new husband Neil takes a drink of wine and says,
Leave but a kiss within the glass. Fair gypsy, feed my fortune.
and when asked what she sees inside the glass, Madeline says happiness, and then is immediately interrupted by the face of Murder, who's appearing in her glass of wine right before her. Murder, who is still outside, begins to burn his voodoo doll of Madeline, which causes her to then say, "I see death," and she instantly faints. Dude was married for... Dude didn't even get to consummate the marriage yet, dude. Talk about blocked. Then we see Madeline's body unfortunately being laid to rest. It leaves Neil a broken, confused, and drunk mess. He's just sitting in random bars in Haiti and begins to hallucinate Madeline's face multiple times and has a whole breakdown in front of these people. Now we're following Charles and Murder, who are seen walking through a graveyard preparing to rob the grave of Madeline's body. As they come across Murder's zombie servants, Charles seems kind of scared and pushes back. But we find out that these zombies are controlled completely by Murder, so he has complete control over them. Murder assumes a rather esoteric stance, which allows him to control the zombies, and they all get to work stealing Madeline's body. But they gotta hurry up because Neil is now seen running through the woods and screaming for Madeline. Charles, Murder, and his zombie servants all hear this, so they pick up the speed and make off with Madeline's body. Neil is just a tad bit too late and stumbles upon the grave, seeing it has been robbed. This next shot is probably one of my favorite kind of tropes in movies. I've always liked when the camera stays still, somebody walks in, discovers a horror that we don't see, and we just hear like a disembodied scream. Example. Yeah, that's the shit I like. Just spooky enough. Now we transition over to the scene involving Neil and Dr. Bruner, the doctor we met earlier. The doctor tells Neil straight up, "Your wife got, dude. And there are only two options. They harvested her for her bones, or she is a zombie. And both of those outlooks ain't too good." The doctor asks Neil if he remembers the conversation that he had with his driver earlier about people being dug up from their graves and reanimated. And for some odd reason, even though Neil saw this with his own 2 eyes, he doubts that is what happened to Madeline. You're in Haiti and zombies exist. Your wife died and now she's not in her grave, and you're still not really sold on the zombie idea. Okay, Neil. The more the doctor tells him, the closer Neil is to believing. He begins to connect the dots and immediately asks about why Charles was so interested in the couple to begin with. The doctor doesn't know, but states that they will get to the bottom of this and make an example of these devil-worshipping grave robbers. Back in Charles's lair, he watches zombie Madeline play piano. You see it in his eyes, he's trying to but that's like a legal gray area. She's dead, that's weird. So he just stares at her longingly. I will say, for being dead in the brain, she's snapping on the piano, dude. Listen to that. I'm gonna start calling her Ray Charles because the eyes are dead, but she's snapping on that piano. Charles then puts a necklace on Ray Charles's neck and says something along the lines of, "You should have just loved me. This is all your fault. You should have smiled at me. This is why we need men's rights." Charles is beginning to realize how bad of an idea killing and reanimating her body was, as she is incapable of reciprocating any kind of love that he gives. He tells Murder he wishes to turn her back to normal, something Murder warns Charles against, stating, "She will not love you if she is alive. You killed her, turned her into a zombie. You expect her to love you when she comes back." You kind of get the realization that Murder wants to her too. Murder kind of convinces Charles that, hey man, you're freaking out when we should be celebrating. And Charles is like, you know what, you're right. And then he instructs his butler to bring him some wine, so him and Murder can have a toast to zombie Madeline. Now, maybe it's just me, but I would not be drinking anything around the zombie guy. God damn, dude. Everybody in this movie is dumb as hell. And after he drinks the wine, Charles begins to fall ill and realizes he has been drugged by Murder. Charles then instructs his butler to attack Murder, and the butler tries but is quickly stunned by Murder's haunting gaze. While the butler is frozen, Murder instructs his zombie servants to carry him upstairs and throw his body into a river. I know I keep getting sidetracked, but this happened earlier in a scene and I kind of just ignored it. But it's gonna happen again, so I have to acknowledge it. This scene has people being thrown into a river and whatnot. So I kind of pictured, you know, people screaming bloody murder. And we do hear that. We hear blood-curdling, bone-chilling screams. But they're not from a human. They're from a fucking vulture. There's a vulture that sits outside and has death rattle-like screams for whatever reason. Also, is that a giant string connected to the back of this bird? It's a real bird, but, you know, maybe they just couldn't tame it, so they're like, fucking put a string on its back. After Charles is drugged and his butler is killed, we cut to Neil and the doctor, who are on horseback in broad daylight. They're looking for a witch doctor who is talking to another man, giving him some voodoo shit and whatnot. Again, getting sidetracked. But this one's a warning, alright? Original movie, obviously in black and white. When I was doing the review for this, I was watching a colorized version. And the witch doctor you see on the horse, that's a white man in blackface. This is something I have never noticed in my multiple times watching this movie. And to make matters worse, it ain't the only one. And the worst part about it is the man that he's talking to is an actual black man. So they had 2 black men in this movie, but one of them had to be talked to by a man in blackface using a horrible accent. If you don't believe it's blackface, just read the IMDb trivia. This movie has more people in blackface than actual black people, if I'm being real with you. The 30s were just bizarre, man. Dr. Bruner then instructs Neil to go get some rest as he talks to the witch doctor. The witch doctor seems kinda hesitant to help them and warns that he might not be able to fight this battle. He's getting old and cannot help. He also mentions that he's kinda scared of the place as it is referred to as the land of the living dead. Madeline, who is still a zombie, is freaking out the maids as she just kind of mindlessly wanders around the castle and goes out on the balcony, overlooking where Neil just so happens to be taking a nap. Neil wakes up, sees her, and immediately starts heading straight towards the castle. Back in the castle, Murder and Charles are sitting at a table. And Charles don't look too good, dude. He looks like shit. He's unable to speak, he's slowly dying, and Murder's just kind of teasing him, making a voodoo doll of his body right in front of him, and laughing about the predicament, saying, hey man, I wish you could tell me your symptoms, but you can't really talk. And while this happens, Neil is traversing the castle in search of Madeline. He winds up in the room that Murder and Charles are in, but immediately passes out. Murder senses his presence and finds his body. He assumes that weird little hand gesture and begins to take control of Madeline, making her walk into the room, pick up a weapon, and try to murder Neil. Madeline is so very close to stabbing Neil in the heart but stops for a second, showing us that Murder's control over her might not be as strong as we thought it was. Murder continues to regain full control over Madeline, and Neil wakes back up. He sees Madeline standing at the edge of the cliff. He pulls her to the side and begins to take on Murder and his servants. Pulls out a gun. Bam! Shoots one right in the chest. Bam! Shoots another one. Bam! 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 But he is noticing that those bullets ain't working on him because they're zombies. As these bullets are doing no damage, he's slowly being pushed over the edge of a cliff. But Dr. Bruner arrives out of nowhere and knocks out Murder. And since he is out, he no longer has control over these zombies, so the zombies just mindlessly walk right over the edge of the cliff, one by one, dying. And Neil goes back to Madeline to talk to her, and it appears as though she is back to life for just a brief period of time before Murder wakes back up and gets control over her again. Murder wakes up and gets the upper hand on Neil and the doctor, and comes very close to zombifying them. But then Charles also comes out of nowhere and saves the day by pushing Murder over the edge of the cliff. The death of, well, Murder gives Madeline her free will and her consciousness back, and she smiles as she is back in the arms of her husband. The movie, oddly enough, ends with the doctor laughing and asking, "Anybody got a match?" And there it is, ladies and gentlemen, White Zombie, the first zombie movie ever made. And how do I feel about it, you know? It's okay for a zombie movie. I do like that they were the first to introduce the voodoo concept. The zombies themselves aren't particularly scary. Sure, they may not be flesh-eating, knocking down doors and walls, super dead beings, but I could see how in the 30s that this probably was pretty scary for people. When I was young and first watched the movie, I'm gonna be honest with you, I thought it kind of sucked because it obviously is not the undead formula that we're used to now. But when I watch it with the context that it is the godfather of zombie movies, then I'd say it's pretty decent. It really does lay a lot of groundwork for the genre we've come to love. Voodoo? Check. Undead corpses? Check. They're walking among us? Check. Invincible to blunt damage and gunfire? Check. This film did a great job at establishing what a zombie is and really set the bar as to what the tone of a zombie movie should be. But there are things about this movie that make it stand out when compared to zombie movies as a whole. For one, the zombies pose no threat to people as they are not as animalistic as we see in present day. They only really kind of act on command of their master, Murder, and even then all they can really do, it seems, is pick you up, grind sugarcane, and stand there menacingly. If one of these zombies came for me, dude, why not just fuck... Wait a second. If I was in Neil's predicament and I was on the cliff being backed up by zombies, I probably would have shot Murder first if I'm being real with you. These slow-ass zombies ain't gonna get me. No way, no how. No way, no how! The idea that one can be turned into a zombie and break free of the curse, such as Madeline did, is not really a concept we ever see, and it seems kind of like a cop-out for a happy ending. You know, maybe it was just 1932 and they had a different outlook on main characters dying or something. Maybe that's just not how they ended movies back then, but it rubs me a weird way. You can just come back from literally being dead. And I get we all gotta start somewhere, but it's kind of insane to me that someone came up with the terrifying concept of zombies, and all they could come up with as far as, you know, what they do is they are slaves. Just slaves. They grind away at sugarcane all day. Was there really no better idea as to what the purpose for these creatures should be other than just sugarcane mill operators for murder? He could have said, I used them to go commit crimes. That would have been way cooler, but not my movie. Didn't make it. It's a nitpick for sure, but it always felt goofy to me that the zombies are so non-threatening that they kind of take a back seat to the rest of the movie as a whole. Like the lover's triangle plot drives the car, zombies are sitting in the shotgun. Not looking at it through the merits of a zombie film and looking at it through the merits of a film, I'd say it's okay. There's some parts of this movie that I truly believe are fascinating and look great, such as the scale of the sets, some of the transition shots, stuff like the shots of Madeline's face appearing in the shadows of bar patrons. I like that it feels like they were throwing stuff at the wall here in terms of not only the zombie stuff, but the effects and what they could pull off with the camera. The matte painting of Murder's castle when Neil is on the beach, and it's phenomenal. It's great. Then there's things I don't really like about it as much. The acting. I can never tell if acting in a 1930s movie is bad because of those silly little accents they're using. It kind of masks bad acting to me. Sometimes. I can tell the acting is bad in this movie though. Sometimes lines are recited in a way that looks as if the actors are just kind of reading off of a cue card. I love the performances of Bela Lugosi and our main actors that play Neil and Madeline, but I think everyone else is kind of hacky in their performances, especially including The blackface witch doctor. If I could go back in time, I'd be beating some people with hammers over that decision. The pacing of the movie. I don't know if you could tell in the way I had structured this review, but the movie moves along very fast. The movie's only an hour long, but the sad thing is I would argue that maybe 10 to 15 minutes of this movie are taken up by shots that lasted way too long. Shots that feel awkward, weren't necessary, or just needed to be cut way sooner than they were. And that just kind of results in this weird feeling of like, hey, this movie moves too fast, but also like lingers on one scene too long. Not everything can be quick cuts and time-saving shots, but there are times where a shot lasts so long that you just legitimately feel awkward. My last criticism of this movie, it is just kind of boring to watch. Now there is some novelty to watching, the first zombie movie ever, but I think that novelty is kind of the only fun you really get out of this movie, because for the most part this movie is just kind of boring. The parts that are exciting are poorly acted, so it's hard to get like a full enjoyment out of them, And it's the 30s, I can't expect the best action from a movie like this, but also King Kong came out a year after this, so I know people were like capable of brainstorming better action. The only parts of this movie that are supposed to be exciting kind of fall short for me, and that's why I say it's boring. But these are just my opinions. If I had to give it a star rating 1 to 10, I'd give it like a semi-hard 5. I would love to hear what you think, your opinions on the movie. Just like, subscribe, and good night. This is Duke of the Dead.